Role-playing games are awesome fun. Yeah, I know, it's a bold statement, but bear with me because I've got more outlandish opinions for you. Usually I go for the ultimate escapism of an RPG, set in a fantasy world where I can play as a half-elf wizard with rampant kleptomania, or an orcish barbarian whose favourite weapon is a human femur, covered in, I don't know, bees? The post-apocalyptic setting is not untrodden territory for RPGs. There's titans like Fallout 1 to 4, Mad Max, the Wasteland series, Borderlands, and others. I've enjoyed most of these titles previously for their more grounded, slightly sci-fi worlds. No elves, no orcs, just barren but interesting scapes as far as you can see, filled with rad roaches, mutants, and bandits. It's a completely different idea to explore, but no less fun. Broken Roads, from Australian developer Drop Bear Bytes, is a single-player, top-down, isometric RPG set in a post-apocalyptic Western Australia. I've been following the development of Broken Roads with keen interest. The top-down isometric view was giving me serious old-school Fallout vibes, and while I wasn't frothing with hype for it, I was interested in trying it out. We start with an opening cinematic. 80% of Australia's population got roasted by nukes, and the remainder are having a good go of living either in defended shanty towns or by murdering and stealing all they can. The character editor is a little bare bones, and I was disappointed by limited choices, so I just chose the hairiest bastard I possibly could. We get a choice of backstory which alters some of our character's stats and abilities. There's the hired gun, the surveyor, the barter crew, or a jackaroo. I decided here that I wanted to roleplay as a fairly practical, perceptive guy who maybe was even a bit street smart, but not very book smart. Depending on your class choice, the first few hours of gameplay will be quite different. I went with the surveyor character who starts in Ballybally Hall. Before we're able to start the actual story, we come to one of the key RPG systems in Broken Roads, the morality system. We get asked a series of questions to determine where we stand on the moral compass, which is quartered into humanist, utilitarian, Machiavellian, and nihilist. I really liked this idea. The tired good versus evil choices of older RPGs is just a little too binary for me these days, and I appreciated having dialogue choices that contained a little more nuance. As I understood it, the choices were the humanist, individuals sort of matter over the group needs, utilitarian, where the group matters over the individual needs, Machiavellian, where it's my group versus the world, and the nihilist, where it's just me versus the world. So I finished the pop quiz as practically as I thought my character would, and I ended up with a mostly utilitarian bend on my moral compass. The first few hours of the game feel very much like a visual point-and-click novel. There's basically no combat, which has received a little bit of pushback from the player base as I understand it. I actually didn't mind this so much, as I was really in the role-playing headspace. I wanted to get to grips with the characters I was likely to be spending my time with. We meet Jake, the charismatic head honcho, his cousins, the capable Jess and the initially surly Mad, as well as Dreamer, the heart of the group, and Jonesy, who appears to be the local musclehead. As a surveyor, we've been dispatched to check out Alderside for an update on their colony goings-on or something. The lads at Ballybally haven't been able to reach them on the radio and fear either technical difficulties or, possibly worse, raiders. So we set off together on the road. I found most of the story pretty interesting. Throughout our adventure, we visit many different outposts that are battling to survive, some that are thriving, and some that have been wiped off the map recently from bandits, raiders, or other assholes. Sometimes, due to my player choices, I was the asshole wiping them off the map. In fact, it happened a couple of times. The cities remained on the map, but when you visit them afterwards, there's nothing but wreckage and charred remains. It's kinda awesome. The actual gameplay consists of uncovering the reasons for violent attacks on outposts that seem to be originating from Kalgoorlie. To do this, you're dispatched across the land to find any evidence and to find a way into the Kalgoorlie stronghold as kind of a spy. Your character choices do change the narrative and how you're seen by other NPCs, but I do feel this could be even leaned into a little bit more. For example, early on in the game, I came across this farmer who was trying to get into Alderside and was mistaken for a raider and subsequently shot. He's found leaning against a tree and pretty much at death's door. You can choose to patch him up or give him a drink, all likely to be pretty futile as he only has a few minutes left to live. I chose to put him out of his misery and just shot him in the head. I went through his bag and found a needle and thread, and I had a moment of pause. What if I needed this to save his life? Is he related to someone in the town who might now have a grudge against me? It was pretty exciting to think about the upcoming possibilities. But no, I was never judged for that particular choice. At one stage, I was trying to gain Kalgoorlie's trust so they'd let me enter. So I visited one of their enemy towns and just blew the whole place up. Everyone died. Kalgoorlie didn't let me enter afterwards, strangely. They were like, "Cheers, bud, now piss off." Was this a bug? And no one back home seemed to think ill of me for the mass murder of an entire city. Weird. I did like that there are hidden abilities in the moral compass. If you span multiple different moralities, humanist, utilitarian, and say Machiavellian, you get specific superficial passives from all of these trees. But if, like me, you go deeply into one specific, say utilitarian, you get higher level passives, like being able to tank damage for one of your crew once per turn, so they remain unharmed and effective in battle. It's a pretty cool idea because it rewards both broad and specific moral choices. I had multiple times during main and side quests where I wasn't given enough prompts to know what I should be doing next to complete the quest. Sometimes the quest log would show all the steps being completed, and yet the quest still remained in my log, and it was clear from the gameplay that I hadn't completed the quest, yet there was nothing leading me to the next step, as it were. It led to a lot of time running around, talking through with every character in town, looking for that one dialogue option that I hadn't explored that would trigger the next part. Now, the issue with this is that even if there are dialogue choices that you haven't clicked yet, beneath a previous dialogue choice that you have clicked, you won't know until you explore the whole dialogue tree, and then expand this to 10 or more characters per town you have to chat to, in order to find the missing dialogue hint to carry the quest forward, and you'll get to a serious point of frustration. The combat has not been favourably reviewed. It's been labelled as easy and lacking depth. There doesn't seem to be a difficulty setting, and while my first few encounters with the combat were a little rough, once I came to grips with the weapons and the action points allocated to each of my characters, it did become easy. After a few level ups in agility, my action points gave me double attacks to all characters, and from there I was slaughtering without challenge. By mid-game, I'd outfitted me and Ella with maximum Deadeye and +2 sniper rifles. Mad was our melee powerhouse with a sawblade mace and maximum melee, and Jess with a shotty and a shitload of agility so she could run like Forrest Gump on cocaine, shoot for days, and still reload all in one turn. There is a cover mechanic which is meant to give you some protection against damage, but I didn't really feel the advantage of this system as much as I would have liked. It was still simple to shoot people behind cover for enough damage that made cover fairly irrelevant. There's also a flanking system that seems to debuff characters that are surrounded. Again, I think this could have used a little increased effect to make it shine and feel more relevant. My other gripe with combat comes with the portraits up top. Now, there is a fair bit of melee opponents in the Outback, dingoes, drop bears, raiders with bats, etc., and they all have a tendency to get all up in your face. Their character models get uncomfortably close to the point where it can be very fiddly to hover the mouse on them to launch an attack. Their portraits above would have made this slightly easier to deal with if we could simply choose our target from there. This unfortunately is not possible. Another thing, some of the enemy portraits are the same picture. You know, roos, dingoes, wombats, that's fine, I get it. But sometimes it would be nice to be a little tactical and knock out a combatant that is going to be next in the line of action above. And with similar portraits, there doesn't seem to be a way to pick which one of the enemies has the next turn. So it leaves me just guessing. It's a little easier when they've had some health removed, but you can't tell when they're all full health. Moving on, let's talk graphics. The settings menu was a bit lacking in options. Basic resolution was the only graphical setting I could alter during my time playing, which was a little bit of a Debbie Downer. Having said that, I really liked the Outback setting and the overall art style of Broken Roads. I found it evocative and stylish. Some of the assets used, like the police cars, which are some of the current models in the Australian Police Force, were classically Australian, and it was cool seeing that on screen. I had no weird model collision and no crashes throughout my play. It ran really quite well on my desktop and laptop with nary a dropped frame to be found. Music and sound were a little bit more of a mixed bag. I really enjoyed the music throughout the game. It felt mysterious in places and suppressed where it needed to be. Overall, it had a sad, reflective, and almost lonely feel which really fit the narrative well. Comparatively, the voice work and sound design had a few more misses than hits, I would say. It was really nice hearing a game with an Australian accent, and after enjoying Bears in Space last week, I was loving the classic twang of my countrymen. But I would say it was maybe a little overdone in parts in Broken Roads.
Bloody hell. Without warning, the raiders were just there, cutting people down as they ran, eviscerating anyone who didn't, and burning everything else.
I found the narrator's voice particularly a little grating after a while, but thankfully there's only a few sections that really require narration. The bits that mattered, the voice work of the main cast, I thought was actually well done. Jake and Jess and Mick and Angela, all believable lines and performances.
But we're not done yet. It's clear by now that help isn't coming, and without some sort of protection, our days here are numbered. The way I see it, we bury our dead and we head off to Meriden.
I found more vocal lines performed in the first half of the game, and the second half surprisingly vacant of voice actors. It boils down to being highly inconsistent, and I guess this is likely due to the independent nature of the game. Voice acting is pretty expensive, so they've had to pick and choose their moments, but you can't help but feel the immersion suffers frequently due to the lack of voice actors. I did enjoy the Australian slang thrown throughout the dialogue, and even more so that there were options to hover over and translate all of our Australianisms. If you're not Australian and you're wondering if we actually talk like this, a lot of the time, yeah. I particularly enjoyed the sound effect that indicated a level up. Truly, the opening of a can of beer is the essence of achievement. In my time playing Broken Roads, the devs have already updated a few systems to improve the gameplay. Notably, your NPC party initially auto-leveled up while you were able to manually make choices for your own character. About halfway through my playthrough of the campaign, the game updated and suddenly I was allowed to control my NPC level ups too, which allowed me more to focus Mads on melee and Jess more on range. So this was a definite sign that Dropbear are listening intently to the feedback given by their players. Maybe work on those portrait combat choices next, fellas? Just a suggestion. Overall, it took me about 15 hours to complete the campaign, and I'd say I could have been faster if I'd had more direction with some of the quests in Lake Deborah, or Lake Deborah, however you say it, and Calgary particularly. For me, Broken Roads has a strong story and characters that I enjoyed my time with. I don't want to spoil anything, but there comes a moment where your NPCs have a choice to side with you or not in a confrontation towards the end, and almost all my crew stayed with me, apart from Jess, who basically said, "No hard feelings, but I don't like you enough to risk my life for you, or the world. Later, Gator." And it left me wondering about all the hard choices I'd made through the game, to examine which one would have pissed her off. It was probably better than if all my characters had just blindly followed me into the abyss. The end too had me pondering my choices throughout my game. Sure, the combat is pretty simple, even more so when you get a few levels under your belt, and I found the quest log could use some serious work in making prompts a bit more comprehensive to follow, but on the other hand, I did like that I had to work to find the solution in a lot of cases. The voice acting was good, but often absent from dialogues, meaning that my immersion suffered a little at times. The graphics were great and performance was solid, so nothing to complain about there. The morality system was one of the best additions I've seen in this area, but I felt it might have been a little bit underused, and I was hoping to see more consequences for the dodgy decisions I made, like wiping cities off the map. Maybe I might be a little biased given the devs are Aussies too, but the great story and the graphics, melded to an interesting morality system, won me over enough to cope with the simple combat and the occasional jankiness I encountered with portraits and the inventory systems. Now, having said that, I can't recommend buying it for the full retail price of 51 Australian bucks. There's a little too much holding it back for that kind of price. Personally, I had enough fun to warrant that price for me, but I'm willing to admit that I've got a bit of positive bias towards this game. So I'm going to say I would probably recommend waiting for a sale on this one. There's definitely fun to be had here if you can understand this is more of an indie title and it does lack a little bit in combat. For some players, I can see the story of the game enough to warrant a sale price on this fairly easily.